Okay, so you've shared this fascinating text with us, Soul in the Driver's Seat, and clearly want to get to the bottom of its take on, well, spirituality and consciousness, right?
Yeah, it really doesn't mess around, does it? It kind of jumps right in with this whole like, what if everything we think is real is actually an illusion?
Right. Like, whoa, are we living in the Matrix here?
Exactly. And the author really doesn't hold back. Like he's basically saying that this thing, this ego, is calling the shots most of the time, and not in a good way.
So, like, it's running the show, but kind of making a mess of things.
Exactly. The author uses this metaphor of a puppeteer controlling a marionette, and the marionette, that's us, our bodies, just being jerked around by these invisible strings of, like, ego desires and fears.
Wow, that's a powerful image. Okay, so let's break down this whole ego
That's
thing.
right.
So we're talking about that part of us that's like constantly worried about me, myself, and I, right?
Yeah, it's always comparing, competing, like never satisfied. It sees everything and everyone else as separate, so it's coming from this place of scarcity, you know what I mean?
Totally. And that explains why, well, why the world can feel so chaotic sometimes.
Absolutely. It's like this constant ego battle royale playing out everywhere.
Okay, so if the ego is the puppet master, then what or who is the soul? The author mentions this spark of the divine. What does that mean?
Right. So the soul is this like this pure energy, right?
Hmm.
It's eternal and exists beyond our physical bodies. It's not bound by like the ego's limitations. It's our connection to something way bigger than ourselves.
So it's like we have this incredible potential for love, for connection, but the ego's often, well, kind of got its hands on the wheel, driving us in circles.
Exactly. And the author calls this struggle, these like opposing forces, the 10 dilemmas. It's like 10 key conflicts between, how the soul sees things versus how the ego sees things.
So like how does this play out in our everyday lives?
Well, you see it in how we approach relationships, careers, even our health. It's all connected.
Okay, so give me an example.
We'll take the first dilemma, fear versus love. It's a big one. You know how fear can just hold you back, right?
Heck, tell me about it. Like fear is the thing that keeps me up at 3 a.m. sometimes.
Exactly. The book argues that fear is the ego's favorite weapon. It uses it to keep us small, keep us from taking risks.
Yeah.
Love, on the other hand, that's the soul's language.
It's like when you choose love, you're choosing to trust in something bigger than yourself, right?
Right. It's about connection, about trusting that you're supported, even when things feel scary.
So it's not about denying fear, but rather like choosing love despite the fear.
And the text argues that it's in those moments when we choose love over fear that we open ourselves up to, like, real miracles.
Okay, wait. Miracles. Like parting the Red Sea kind of miracles, or something a little more subtle.
Well, the book defines a miracle as a shift in perception, right? It's a moment when you choose to see the world not through the ego's eyes, but through the eyes of the soul. It doesn't have to be supernatural, but it's those moments of grace, of like, wow, that was lucky, or those little synchronicities that happen.
So you're saying miracles happen all the time, we just don't always notice them.
Often, yeah. We're so caught up in our heads and our own little dramas that we miss them.
Wow, that's pretty profound. So we have the power to create miracles in our lives just by choosing to see things differently.
In a way, yes. It's about shifting your perspective, which then shifts your energy, which then, shifts your experience.
Okay, I'm with you so far, but how do we actually do that? How do we live more from that soul-centered place instead of being ruled by the ego all the time?
It's a journey, for sure. And it all starts with awareness, becoming aware of that ego voice in your head.
So it's about self-awareness, but it sounds like it goes even deeper than that.
It does. It's not just noticing your thoughts and feelings, but learning to discern which ones are coming from the ego and which ones are coming from the soul, like tuning into a different channel.
Yeah. So we all have this inner guidance system, but we just have to learn how to listen to it, right?
Exactly. And the more you listen to that inner wisdom, the more aligned you become with your true path and purpose.
Wow, it's like we have this internal compass, but it's so easy to get distracted by everything going on around us, all the noise and demands.
Exactly.
So it's about learning to quiet the mind, to create space for that inner wisdom to come through.
And the more you do that, the more you connect with your true self, with your soul. And that's where you find the real magic.
The magic of living a more authentic and joyful life.
Exactly. It's about aligning with your soul's purpose, and that's when things really start to click.
It's interesting. For a book about spirituality, this soul in the driver's seat, it doesn't shy away from, the heavy stuff.
No, it doesn't. Like, it goes there.
We're talking about the ego shadow side.
Right. And it can be pretty dark.
Yeah.
The author connects that darkness to, like, those core ego fears.
Hmm.
You know, the fear of not being enough, the fear of not having control. When those fears take over, it can get, well, pretty messy.
Yeah, it's like hurt people, right? Like if you're not connected to your own goodness, to that source energy, it's easy to get trapped in those cycles of pain and suffering.
Exactly. And the author, he's not suggesting that we're, doomed to repeat those patterns forever, but he is saying that by understanding how the ego works, like its mechanics, we can start to break those cycles.
So it's not about getting rid of the ego entirely, because come on, who are we kidding?
Yeah, right.
But it's more about kind of shifting the power dynamic, like giving the soul more of a say in how we show up in the world.
It's like learning to drive with a really bad backseat driver. You know what I mean? You can't necessarily kick them out of the car, but you can learn to, like, tune them out and focus on, the road ahead.
And speaking of tuning in, the author has some really interesting things to say about the power of thought.
Okay. Power of thought. I'm intrigued, but I got to say I'm a bit skeptical too. I've heard this whole your thoughts create your reality thing before, but it always seemed, I don't know, a little too simplistic. Like, if I just think
Yeah.
really hard about winning the lottery.
You'll magically become a millionaire.
Exactly.
Probably
Yeah.
not.
But that's not really what the text is saying. It's not about, magical thinking. It's about recognizing the very real connection between our thoughts, our beliefs, and ultimately our experiences.
Okay, so you're saying our thoughts aren't just these fleeting things. They actually have an impact on the world around us.
Think about it. Every action, every decision, every relationship, it all starts with a thought, right?
Right.
So if you're constantly thinking, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, you're going to show up in a way that reflects that belief. You
Yeah.
might self-sabotage or push people away.
Okay, I'm starting to see what you mean. So it's not about pretending we don't have negative thoughts. It's more about becoming aware of them and then maybe choosing to focus on more positive ones, right?
Exactly. It's about shifting your energy, your vibration.
So it's like tuning into a different radio station. Instead of doom and gloom, it's the love and possibility channel.
I like that analogy.
Yeah.
And it's not about being positive all the time, because that's just not realistic.
Nobody's happy 24/7.
Exactly. It's about having a more conscious relationship with those thoughts.
Right, becoming more aware of what's going on in our own heads.
Yeah.
And then, choosing thoughts that are actually helpful and empowering, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which brings us to another important idea in the text, healing.
Oh, okay.
Because healing isn't just about, like, fixing what's broken on a physical level.
Right. So we're talking about healing the mind, the heart, the whole shebang.
The whole shebang. It's about getting to the root of our suffering, which the author says often comes down to these unconscious patterns and beliefs, some of which we've been carrying around for years.
Wow, yeah. Like baggage we didn't even know we were carrying.
Exactly.
So how do we even begin to, unpack all that?
Well, it starts with recognizing that we're not broken.
Right.
It's just we have these things we need to work through.
Right. So it's like we can heal those deeper wounds. We can start to let go of those old beliefs. And then, that's when the real transformation can begin.
Exactly.
That's when we can start creating a life that's more in alignment with who we really are.
And that process, it can be messy.
Oh, for sure. And sometimes it's downright terrifying to confront those deeper parts of ourselves.
Absolutely. But the important thing to remember is that, you don't have to do it alone.
Yeah, having a good support system makes all the difference.
It does. And that could be anyone you trust.
People who can hold space for you.
Exactly.
And you know what I find interesting? The book really makes you think differently about time.
Oh, yeah. He goes there.
It's like, what is time, really?
Right. The author actually suggests that time, as we typically experience it, the past, present, and future, might just be, another one of the ego's illusions.
Okay, hold on. Time is an illusion. But what about deadlines and birthdays and the fact that I can't just, undo that embarrassing thing I said yesterday?
I hear you. It's not that those things aren't real. It's more that our everyday experience of time as this linear thing, it's just one way of perceiving reality. The soul, the author argues, experiences time differently.
So are you saying there's only the present moment?
The present moment is all we truly have, yeah.
Okay, but if that's true, and what about all those regrets from the past or the worries about the future? Where do those fit in?
They only exist in our minds.
Wow.
The past is just a story we tell ourselves, And the future, well, it hasn't happened yet.
So if we're always dwelling on the past or worrying about what might happen in the future, we're missing out on, well, on the only thing that's real, which is right now, this present moment.
Exactly. And when we can really be present, that's when we tap into a different level of awareness, a sense of peace that we just can't access when we're stuck in our heads.
Yeah. But it's hard, isn't it? Like our minds are kind of addicted to that mental chatter.
They are. It's like a constant loop playing in the background.
So how do we break free from that? How do we actually learn to be more present?
Any practice that helps you kind of train your attention.
So it's like training a muscle, but for our minds.
Exactly. It's about learning to observe those thoughts without judgment.
So not trying to like force ourselves to have a blank mind
Right. Just noticing the thoughts as they come and go without getting swept away by them.
and gently guiding our attention back to the present moment.
Exactly.
Wow, it's like we're reclaiming our power from, I don't know, from the tyranny of our own minds and stepping into the fullness of, well, of this moment right here, right now.
And that's a really beautiful way to put it.
So here we are wrapping up our deep dive into Soul in the Driver's Seat. And I have to say, this book has really, like, really got me thinking.
That's a lot to take in, right?
It is. It's like it's challenging a lot of my assumptions about reality, about what it means to be human, you know?
And yet, for all the heady concepts, there's this underlying message of hope. Like we're not just, victims of circumstance. We actually have the power to choose something different.
Right. Like we have agency. But that's kind of where the rubber meets the road for me. It's one thing to, talk about the soul and all its wisdom, but how do we actually like live that? How do we bring those teachings into our everyday lives?
The $1 million question, right? And the good news is this book doesn't just leave us hanging. It actually gives us some tools, some practical things we can do to start bridging that gap between, theory and actually living it.
Okay, so what are some of those key takeaways? Like what can we start doing today to become more, well, more soul-centered?
Well, it all starts with awareness, right?
Hmm.
Like we talked about before. Paying attention to our thoughts, our feelings, but without, beating ourselves up about them.
Right, so becoming more aware of the egos, like its MO, its patterns.
Exactly. And then as you start to recognize those patterns, you start to see the space between, the stimulus and the response. That space where you can actually choose a different way of reacting.
So it's like instead of just reacting automatically like we usually do, we can hit the pause button.
Yes, that pause is everything.
And in that pause, we have the power to choose a different thought, a different action.
Exactly. And the more you do that, the stronger that soul muscle gets.
I love that. So it's like we're literally rewiring our brains to respond in a way that's more aligned with our true selves.
And as you do that, you start to experience everything differently. You feel more connected to yourself, to others, and you find more meaning, more purpose in everything you do.
It's like you're tapping into this wellspring of wisdom and love that's, well, that's always been there.
It's always been there.
Wow. Well, on that note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive,
I think so.
but it really feels like the beginning of a much larger journey, doesn't it?
It really does.
A journey of self-discovery, of healing, of really stepping into our power as souls having this human experience.
Beautifully said. And may we all continue to explore those depths with curiosity and compassion.
Yes, to that, to curiosity, to compassion, and to always, always remembering who we truly are. Thanks for joining us on this incredible deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.